successful, and they were there, and when these women used to come to see who this mad Benji is, who's sitting in this little room, I used to start telling them stories about, oh, this is Giriraj, he's a potter in Delhi, and now he's free from making little pots, he's making huge pots for the Prime Minister and things like that, and he's earning so much. And so telling these stories, they're listening, then they used to say to me, what are you doing? And I'd always take some embroidery with me, so I was doing some. And since I wanted to do patchwork there, I was patching different colored cloth. And I said, I'm making a cushion, do you want to try it? So they started. And their level of, because they had never done this, it was difficult for them even to understand a sequence of red, yellow, blue, red, yellow, blue, that it has to follow. And of course their stitches were crude and the pieces were things, but at the end of the day, I just used to give them some money, and they used to say, what is this? And I said, well, you made a cushion, And they said, oh, we can earn like this. I said, yes. And that room, you won't believe, it got full of people. So then came the next drama. That we were sitting sewing. I managed to get a tailor from the village to cut more pieces of cloth, and we both were sitting, everyone was doing. And suddenly, there was a woman peering at us from the window. So I got up and I said, don't come, why don't you come inside, this is for you. She said, no, she said, I can't come, I'm a chamar. No. And I said, of course you can come, come. And all the women started saying, nay, you can't let her come and all that. So I said, well, we are all here and she's coming and I'm inviting her. So there was initially a lot of resistance. But again, working together, spending time, changes people's attitudes. I always say that communication is what we need in this country. If people interact with each other, they can see we're all the same. So sitting in that tiny room, cheek by jowl, Muslims, Hindus, Meenas, Chamars, everybody, they all suddenly realized, and things like there used to be separate wells in the village, they all started sort of helping each other, interacting. I made a rule that every day one person has to make tea for all of us. Doesn't matter who they are, what they are, they have to do it and we all have to drink it. Or if you don't drink it, then you're out. And slowly these things happen. And now it's 27 years later, no more than that now, 30 years. These women are earning 2 crores last year was their turnover. Of 300 women. But apart from that, these women who would not visit each other in the village now travel all over India. They stay, whether they're Muslims or Hindus or whatever, they stay in whatever place we choose for them. Could be a dharamsala in one place, it could be a YWCA in Bombay, and they all stay, they cook together, they eat together, and the only time we actually feel the need of the men whom they thought they couldn't do without and to whom they were an appendage because they used to call each other, ये तो इसकी बीवी है या इसकी माँ है. Now they all have names, they call each other by names. And once a year they say, I think we need the men to cook us for our picnic. So then the men come and they make, lovely food for us and serve us. So things change, and once again, I think craft, which is actually about working with your hands, but also involves your heads and your hearts, is the best way to slowly infiltrate social change. Thank you.
My turn?
Speak from there?
I speak from there. Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Bajpayee ji, for giving me this opportunity. Thanks, Raza Foundation. Vajpayee, not Vajpayee. Well, the topic which you have assigned to me is quite challenging to speak on, precisely because I am one person who left practice actually and started writing on art, understanding of art and delivering lectures and so on and so forth, and also actively participating in all kinds of protests right from childhood. So my intervention are very different, my experiences are very different. However, I don't claim that I'm a very sanitized person. Neither I claim that I am very sacred and divine. The whole syndrome, I would like to call it as a syndrome, the syndrome and sacred and divine has produced multiple meta-narratives that are basically part and parcel of project of protected ignorance. If I say protected ignorance, I mean, I'll just explain you in a very simple term. A professor of physics gets up in the morning and pours water to sun, despite knowing the fact that water will never reach to sun. So this is a fantastic example of protected ignorance. So you can imagine that how the sacred and divine has produced number of meta-narratives which have become part and parcel of our daily life, and also the very process of consciousness, how our consciousness gets built. And just in, I think in month of June, I delivered a lecture on consciousness of senselessness. Maha was very much part of that gathering. So this whole senselessness, whether in art field or in the art world, do we read this kind of senselessness? And do we really have a very constructive consciousness that really lead to something, or really does it have any impact on the art production? There are very few artists who have taken art practices as a part of their protest, as a part of their expression of protest, and also the political resolve not to be part of the meta-narratives of the Brahminic modernity, as well as the kind of things that are going on in the present day public sphere. So we know that, at least I would like to say that, you know, India has three great achievements: that we are a fantastic labor supply country, we are a Mithyavadi Sanskriti, and we are a Vitambanavadi Sanskriti. So Vitambana is basically culture of defamation. So you rape anyone, you किसी को भी छिनाल कह दो, किसी को भी गाली दो, कुछ भी करो. So these are all part of the culture of defamation. In this kind of a syndrome, whether the artists have really been able to navigate or really think on those lines and have produced, or really they have sensitized themselves, or even for that matter whether they are getting sensitized even in the art school, is a big question. It's a very big question, because large number of our art schools are governed by the governments, and the teachers, the institutions there are governed by the state civil service conduct rules, which becomes very problematic. And I'm sure Vajpayee will agree with me. He, being a bureaucrat, he knows how it controls the whole exercise, the creativity and everything. And even in the university spaces, it is very difficult to claim that kind of freedom. Precisely because these days universities are also coming under the conduct rules of the central government services and all those things, civil service conduct rules. So the impetus which is required for your creative expression, and the ways in which things are being crafted. So students are forced, or rather artists have also chosen to be part of the project of protected ignorance that has been going on in the country since ages. And there is hardly any sensitivity or sensitization towards any kind of issues or problems, barring few exceptions. Those exceptions are very, very few. And largely the creative artists, I'm sorry to say, it may hurt them, but I'm also part of that gang, I would say, and product of that syndrome. You know, they practice all that very much transcendental metaphysics. So their creative practices are so much associated with transcendental metaphysics, Brahma, Parabrahma kind of things. You know? Whether you have tantric art, you have any religious figure, and you know number of figures, and you simply try to interpret or always say, "ये तो मेरा Parabrahma है," you know. So it's all Vedantic syndrome. So your creativity is so much rooted in the Vedantic syndrome that it does not empower you to be very critical and also to make a critique of the society. So this is a huge problem, and therefore any artist who is coming out of this and making artworks, I consider them as people who are really creating or practicing art, and it also becomes part of the social action because it is aimed at dismantling those inhibitions which we have grown with, and this becomes highly challenging because in our everyday life everything becomes sacred and divine, and every time you have those inhibitions. So dismantling those inhibitions become very important and a very fundamental part. And whether there is this whole idea of contradictions which always goes. I mean, I would like to quote in this case what Dr. Ambedkar had said in the Constituent Assembly, that we are entering into a life of contradictions. So in political sphere we will be one, and in the social and economic sphere we won't have any kind of an equality. So these are the contradictions, and Indians are so much fond of living in contradictions. And not only that, what is worst is that the intellectual class of the country and the creative class of the country also wish to live in these contradictions by reading Foucault and enjoying that anarchy. So the anarchical thinking is become so much embedded and part and parcel of life that you do not wish to think otherwise. And this becomes your solace. And that is why you always go and say that this is my, you know, मेरा है ये, मेरा आर्ट है, आपको समझना है तो समझो, नहीं तो मत समझो. These are the kind of sentences which the artist always make whenever the artist is pushed against the wall by the common people in India. So this kind of a elitism that goes in the art gallery practices, and the consciousness of that elitism again is very fundamental to understand how much that really consciousness has a sense of resolve which is there in the Article 19 of the Indian Constitution, or for that matter even having a resolve in the Article 51 vis-a-vis that of Article 25. So therefore your creative self, it becomes like something like the perpetuation of a self, and the Brahmanic I continue to exercise anarchy and psychotic perversions in the public sphere. Because it's very simple, India is a caste society, and anybody speaking on caste becomes castevala. This is very candid terms that are being produced, and anybody taking name of Ambedkar or Phule or these things, then that becomes Dalit scholar or something like a Dalit discourse. But when that person says it is a Savarna discourse, तो बड़ी बड़ी मिर्ची लग जाती है. फिर अगर वो कहता है नहीं तुम तो सवर्ण आर्टिस्ट हो, तो आर्टिस्ट लोगों को मिर्ची लग जाती है। तो ये जो मिर्ची लगने की प्रक्रिया है वो इतनी क्या बोलते हैं उसको, इतनी दमदार है कि उनकी सारा जो मर्यादा पुरुषोत्तम का की जो संकल्पना है, वो सारी मर्यादा पुरुषोत्तम की संकल्पना सारा वेदांत लॉजिक में ऐसी डूब जाती है और उसमें इतने सारे गोते खाती है और फिर ऊपर आके बाहर आके फिर वो कहता है नहीं मैं तो पोस्ट मॉडर्न हूं। तो भाई एक्शन कहां पे आया फिर, और हमारी कला जो है उसका क्या महत्व रहता है, ये भी आपको सोचना पड़ेगा। यू विल हैव टू थिंक ऑफ योरसेल्फ। आई मीन इट्स नॉट दैट आई एम गोइंग टू गिव एनी जजमेंट और एनीथिंग, or even for that matter, you know, I as a teacher, I can say these things. Fifth क्या है वो टीचर्स दिन अपना September, 5th September we have to celebrate Teachers Day, on whose name Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan. What did he did? He was a fantastic example of plagiarism, who stole thesis of his own student and published on his name. There was a case in Calcutta High Court. All those things are there, very much there in public sphere. But even then, हमारा दिमाग जो है ऐसा ट्यून हुआ है कि 5 सितंबर आते ही हाय शिक्षक दिन की मुबारक हो। अरे किसकी बारी? If I do same things, I or Mahalakshmi or my friend Rakesh and all, if we do those things, we will be chucked out of the university within no time. There is a punishment for that. But irrespective of that, we call him as a great teacher, so and so and so forth. And what he did is, I mean, he was also part of the Vedantic syndrome. It's as simple as this. So number of people whom we consider as thinkers, they are part of the Vedantic syndrome. And therefore, there cannot be any criticality as such. So your criticality is and the thinking of yourself, it becomes all the time as a Brahmanic eye. And therefore, the creative impulses which you always derive from these kind of meta-narratives would not have any kind of a critique of a society. However, there are number of artists in India who are critically engaged on certain social issues, on certain ideas, and they are producing artworks. So that those artworks are part of their, social activism, as a part of art activism, and they are always there. They are not bothered whether I get money or not, whether I will get sold or not. So they don't have these kind of concerns at all. So there is this kind of an engagement that always goes, and more and above all, speaking against any master becomes very problematic in the art world. How dare you speak? It is something like in your gaiki, you have to go down all the time, and you can't go against the master, both in the sphere of dance and in the sphere of sangeet, music. However, we are happy that in the field of at least painting, sculpture, and all, the students are not bogged down by this kind of a tradition, and the student will come out of the institution and say, "Go to hell! I am not going to respect him." And he does his own thing. He carves out his own way. So the dynamics are very different. However, how you make choices and how you create those kind of pictorial signifiers, that also matters a lot. Similarly, the way artists are being hounded all the time. You see, I mean, every time there is a complaint and all those things, and we have a very, very big history, right? Starting from post-independent India, Akbar Padamsee becomes the first victim. And then later on, you have some 70s, there were very 2 or 3 cases in Mumbai. But after 1990 especially, you will find that there is a plethora of cases against the artist. And they are being hounded like anything. Though, ultimately the court decides. That's a different thing. But that idea of justice to artists does not come at once, and neither the kind of a fight which an artist has to go under is enormous. It is same like what the Dalits are going and not getting any justice at all. So you do require those kind of laws which will protect the activities under Article 19, and we need to have those kind of things. Then only then artists will certainly come, many youngsters will certainly come on the street and make art as part of their protest, as part of their social action, as a part of their social activity. And lastly, I would like to submit that those who are engaged in this kind of activities, they are certainly not part of the speculative aesthetics. So, as long as you remain in the speculative terms, which does not have any objectives, so those will remain part of the protected ignorance, and those who are against it, against killing this protected ignorance, will always remain in very differently, and they are the one who are really, enlightening us. And I just want to end that there is a famous framework of Dr. Ambedkar, which he says in Annihilation of Caste, that is rules and principles. So if we have the principle of inequalities or the principle of anarchies, our rules will be accordingly. But if we have a consciousness of righteousness as a principle, I am 100% sure we will also have the rules around those kind of principles. And that will create a better society, resolved to the justice which is there in our constitution. And I hope that every citizen Republic of Government of India realizes this aspect of the self as well as the non-self. Thank you very much.
I hope I have not taken time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let me profusely thank Ashok ji that he invited me to share some of the ideas on this very important topic. And when he says that we are passing through civilizational crisis, I think it's probably a humanitarian crisis and evolutionary crisis, that at times the wheel of evolution, even if it's for a short time, take a reverse motion and it damages the entire humanity. हिंदी बोलने में कोई परेशानी हिंदुस्तानी बोल लेते हैं। मैं बंबई में था और वहाँ एक छोटी सी नशिस्त की गई थी जिसमें 3 पाकिस्तान के शायर और 3 हिंदुस्तान के शायर, वहाँ से जूम के साथ बातचीत हो रही थी। ये जावेद अख्तर साहब ने ऑर्गेनाइज किया था। वहाँ उन्होंने क्वेश्चन आंसर सेशन रखा अपनी अपनी शायरी सुनाने के बाद, और उस क्वेश्चन आंसर सेशन में उनको अंदाजा था कि थोड़ा हेजिटेशन होता है हमेशा, पहला सवाल कौन पूछे, वो यहाँ भी होगा थोड़ी देर बाद, पहला सवाल कौन पूछे। तो उन्होंने खुद सवाल पूछ लिया और मुझसे पूछ लिया और कहने लगे कि गौहर साहब ये बताइए कि ये सब हम कर रहे हैं, इतना लिखते हैं, बातचीत होती है, ऑर्गेनाइज करते हैं, इतना झंझट पालते हैं, ये सब करने का कोई फायदा है क्या? हम लिख रहे हैं, आर्ट पोएम्स लिखते हैं। तो वहां से मुझको इसका क्लू भी मिल गया, जिसका मैं वही जवाब यहां आपके सामने रखना चाहता हूं। एक नज्म है जो एक पाकिस्तानी शायर, और क्यों हम उसे पाकिस्तानी कहते हैं पता नहीं, फैज अहमद फैज अब से 30 साल पहले 40 साल पहले लिखते हैं। इस नज्म में कुल मिलाकर के 132 शब्द हैं। वो नज्म गाई जाती है, फैज साहब बाहर हैं पाकिस्तान से, और वहां हॉल के अंदर गाने के वक्त पे इनकलाब जिंदाबाद के नारे लगने लगते हैं। इस नज्म को आप लोगों ने सबने सुना है, और अगर नहीं सुना है तो इस हॉल में होने का हक नहीं है। इस नज्म का किसी को भी आप में से टाइटल नहीं पता होगा। वबयक्का वजरबिक इसका टाइटल है, अरबिक से। एक आयत है कुरान के अंदर जो डिस्क्राइब करती है कि जब डे ऑफ रेकनिंग होगा, जब कयामत आएगी, तब क्या क्या हो। और वो नज्म गाई जाती है वहां, इनकलाब जिंदाबाद के नारे लगते हैं, और उन नारों के बाद लोग भीड़ है बहुत ज्यादा। वहां से जब डिस्पर्स होना शुरू होते हैं तो जिन लोगों की पहुंच थी मिलिट्री में, उनके घर टेलीफोन आ जाते हैं कि आज घर पे मत सोना, कहीं और चले जाना घर से। और उनमें से जो सुनने वाले हैं ज्यादातर अरेस्ट हो जाते हैं। वो नज्म वहां एक माहौल में ज़िया के, जब वो इस्लाम लागू करने पे लगे हुए थे, उस वक्त लिखी हुई एक नज्म है। और वो 30-40 साल बाद, ये तो होता ही है कि 15-20 दिन के अंदर वो वहां पर रिकॉर्डिंग, पुराने सेट अगर आपको याद हो तो वो हुआ करते थे जिसमें 2 कैसेट लग जाते थे, उसमें वो रिकॉर्ड की जाती है, उसकी कॉपीज बनाई जाती हैं, और वो फिर दुबई पहुंचती है, और दुबई से हिंदुस्तान आती है। तो 15-20 दिन के अंदर वो बॉर्डर्स क्रॉस कर लेती है। और हम सब, मतलब मैं अलीगढ़ में हूं तो वहां पढ़ रहा था उस जमाने में, तो वहां तक पहुंच जाती है। और फिर वो 30-40 साल बाद एकदम से जिंदा होती है, और बॉर्डर के इस पार जिंदा होती है, और इस हद तक जिंदा होती है कि उसके ऊपर एतराजात शुरू होते हैं, वही एतराजात। लेकिन वो नज्म बॉर्डर्स तोड़ करके इस तरह बाहर निकलती है कि फिर वो स्टेलनबॉश यूनिवर्सिटी में गाई जाती है, जहां शायद कोई उर्दू नहीं जानता, और वहां से लेकर के जर्मनी हो, जापान हो, या यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स हो, वहां पर वो नज्म गाई जाती है और ट्रांसलेट होती है। ये है ताकत। यानी वो 132 शब्द, हो सकता है कि इधर उधर हो, काउंटिंग में मेरी गलती हुई हो, वो 132 शब्द जो हैं, वो न सिर्फ ये कि सारी हदें तोड़ देते हैं, जिनमें वक्त की भी हद है, 30 साल बाद पैदा हो रही है दोबारा से। और ये कोई एक एग्जाम्पल नहीं है। अगर आपको याद हो तो मैं खामोश रहा नज्म भी बार बार दुनिया के अलग अलग हिस्सों में, जर्मनी से निकल करके अलग अलग जबानों में ट्रांसलेट होके पहुंचती। क्यों ऐसा होता है? क्यों ऐसा होता है कि ये नज़में, गज़लें, पेंटिंग्स इस तरह से निकलती हैं और बार बार जिंदा हो जाती है? अक्सर हमें ये लगता है, और खासतौर से मेरी हमेशा से ये शिकायत रही है प्रोग्रेसिव लोगों से और प्रोग्रेसिव मूवमेंट के साथ, कि हम आर्ट मैटर्स को कम करके आंकते हैं। लेकिन याद रखिए कि फैशिस्ट उसे कम करके नहीं आंकते। दुनिया भर के फैशिस्ट जानते हैं कि एक नज्म जो 132 शब्दों की हो सकती है, 50 शब्दों की हो सकती है, 60 शब्दों की हो सकती है, उसकी मार बहुत गहरी होती है। इट मैटर्स, आर्ट मैटर्स। हमें लगता है कि एक पेंटिंग लगी हो, एक कहानी किसी ने लिख दी हो, लिख दी तो लिख दी, क्या फर्क पड़ता है, लेकिन इट मैटर्स। और ये उनको बहुत अच्छी तरह से पता है कि इट मैटर्स। और इसलिए अगर हम हिस्ट्री की तरफ देखें, बाहर दुनिया में ना भी नजर डालें, और मुझे ज्यादातर मालूम भी नहीं है, मैं थोड़ा बहुत उर्दू और हिंदुस्तानी लैंग्वेजेस के बारे में जानता हूं, तो मैं अभी एक किताब पलट करके देख रहा था, और उस किताब का नाम है जब्त शुदा नज़्में। इसमें 117 नज़्में, ये 1857 से लेकर के और आजादी तक जो नज़्में जब्त की गई, यानी बैन लगाया गया जिनके ऊपर, जिनका पढ़ना, जिनका छापना एक जुर्म बन गया था, वो नज़्में सारी जमा है वहां पर। अगर हम शायरों को देखना शुरू करें, ये सिर्फ उर्दू जबान, सिर्फ और सिर्फ उर्दू जबान की, तो ये 117 जो नज़्में हैं, इसमें राम प्रसाद बिस्मिल से लेकर के अशफाकुल्लाह खां से लेकर के ब्रज नारायण चकबस, सागर निजामी, हसरत मोहानी, जोश मरियावादी, हफीज जालंधरी, मखदूम मोहिउद्दीन, जानिसार अख्तर, और यहां तक के आखिरी नज़्म है उसके अंदर साहिल लुधियानवी की, ये नज़्में शामिल हैं जो जब्त की गई। तो अगर हम ये सोच लें कि आर्ट डज नॉट मैटर, तो फिर इन्हें बैन करने की जरूरत उस दुनिया के सबसे पावरफुल ताकत को जरूरत नहीं थी जहां सूरज नहीं डूबा करता था। उनको भी जरूरत पड़ी कि इन नज़्मों को बैन किया जाए, और लगातार बैन किया जाए। और अगर हम उर्दू लिटरेचर से फिर मैं एग्जाम्पल्स लूं, तो वो चाहे इसमत चुगताई हो या सादत हसन मंटो हो, इनकी कहानियों को, किताबों को बैन किया गया। पर इन दोनों के ऊपर जो वो था, चार्ज था, वो फोहश अश्लील लिटरेचर का था। लेकिन आजाद हिंदुस्तान में जब कृष्णचंद की किताब हम वहशी हैं बैन की जाती है, तो उसमें तो सिर्फ बेला और चमेली का खत है जो वजीर आजम के नाम लिखा है, उसको भी बैन करने की जरूरत पड़ जाती है, और आजाद हिंदुस्तान में जरूरत पड़ जाती है। तो ये कि पढ़ना और सुनना तक जुर्म बन जाता है। फैज को सुनना पाकिस्तान में जुर्म बन जाता है, फैज को गाना हिंदुस्तान में जुर्म बन जाता है, सीए मूवमेंट के दौरान जुर्म हो जाता है, और हर तरह की अटैक किए जाते हैं। उसकी एक एक लाइन को इधर से उधर डाइसेक्ट किया जाता है। और मैं देखता हूं कि आप में से जो लोग गए होंगे किसान मूवमेंट के दौरान, उस वक्त भी अगर आपने देखा होता तो वहां गाया जा रहा था, वहां आर्ट प्रोड्यूस हो रही थी सड़क के ऊपर। आने वाले जमाने का इतिहास भी शाहराहों पे ही अब लिखा जाएगा, ये हो रहा। मैं जो आर्ग्यू करने की कोशिश कर रहा हूं वो यही है सिर्फ कि हम उसको बहुत ज्यादा, यहां पर जो हम बातचीत कर रहे हैं, यहां इस काले दौर के अंदर कुछ हो रहा है, बाहर इस चार दीवारी के, इट मैटर्स। यहां आपका आना इट मैटर्स, और किसी एक आर्टिस्ट का पेंटिंग बनाना, एक कविता लिखना, इट मैटर्स। मेरी समझ ये कहती, मेरे पास वक्त कितना बचा है?
2 मिनट।
साहिल लुधियानवी 17 साल की उम्र में एक नज्म लिखते हैं, और उस नज्म की लाइनें हैं कि हुकूमत की बुनियाद ढाए चला जा, ख्वाबों को, जवानों को बागी बनाए चला जा, बरस आग बनकर फिरंगी के सर पर तकब्बर की दुनिया गिराए चला जा। ये इस तरह की नज्म है। एक बच्चा लिख रहा है, और वो एक अफगान पत्रिका है जो बॉम्बे से निकलती थी, उसमें ये छपती है, ये बैन हो जाती है फौरन। साहिर एक लुधियानवी एक बड़ा शायर होकर के उभरता है बाद में, लेकिन ऐसी हजारों नज़में हमारी हर जबान में उस वक्त लिखी जा रही और ये परेशान कर रही हैं उन लोगों को जो ताकतवर हैं। इसलिए भी परेशान कर रही हैं कि ये लोगों के दिलों को गरमा रही। और मैं ये समझता हूं कि जब मैंने इंजीनियरिंग की तो मेरी शख्सियत जब ढल रही थी तो उसे ढालने में इन नज़मों का, इन कहानियों का, इन पेंटिंग्स का जो देखने को मिली मुझे, एक बड़ा हाथ था। और अगर मेरी शख्सियत ढल रही थी तो मैं ये समझता हूं कि यही आर्ट, यही लिटरेचर हिंदुस्तान की शख्सियत भी ढाल रहा था, हिंदुस्तान की पहचान भी ढाल रहा था, हमें यह बता रहा था कि हिंदुस्तान है क्या, और हम अपने को हिंदुस्तानी कहें तो क्यों कहें अपने को हिंदुस्तानी। और जब मुझसे कोई पूछता है अब कि क्या तुम्हें हिंदुस्तानी होने पर फख्र है, तो इसी आर्ट के बलबूते के ऊपर, इसी लिटरेचर के बलबूते के ऊपर मैं ये सवाल पलट कर पूछने की कोशिश करता हूं कि जब फख्र की बात कर रहे हो तो किन चीजों पर फख्र करें? क्या मैं इस पे फख्र करूं कि मेरा देश कास्ट सिस्टम से जकड़ा हुआ है आज तक, और अभी भी इस देश के अंदर एक दूसरे का छुओ पानी नहीं पीते? क्या मेरी हिस्ट्री ये कह रही है कि मेरे देश के अंदर मर्द के मरने के ऊपर औरत को जला दिया जाता था? क्या इसके ऊपर फख्र करूं मैं? नहीं, मैं नहीं कर सकता। मुझे ये चूज करना होगा कि मैं किस चीज के ऊपर फख्र करूं, इसके आर्ट के ऊपर, इसके लिटरेचर के ऊपर, इसकी खूबसूरती के ऊपर, इसमें रंगों के मिलने के ऊपर फख्र करूं। हाँ, तो मैं तैयार हूं। पर बहुत कुछ ऐसा है जिसके ऊपर मैं शर्मिंदा भी होऊंगा, और यही आर्ट मुझे सिखाती है कि क्या ऐसा है जिस पर फख्र किया जा सकता है और क्या ऐसा नहीं है जिस पर आप शर्मिंदा ही हो सकते हैं, फख्र हरगिज नहीं कर सकते। थैंक यू।
Thank you, sir. Dr. Vapai, आपने मुझे बुलाया. As you know, I can never say no to you. So after these three brilliant presentations, it's to say something which can top that. I still have to absorb the field opened up. But I'll speak a little bit about my personal practice and then something about the question of art matters and in society. My personal practice for the last 35 years has been dealing with the questions of ecology, nature and labor. I started as a photographer. My photography was always, from the beginning, I worked with migrant labor for a long time, for 3 years. Then I started examining question of street work, street labor and the conditions of labor. Also worked with the community which was displaced, जैसे आपने बताया, from a forest. And when I was working with migrant labor in Gujarat, South Gujarat, I was often asked by the workers there, जिनकी मैं तस्वीरें खींच रहा था, कि इससे हमारी ज़िंदगी में क्या बदलाव आएगा? आप तस्वीरें खींच रहे हैं, तो मेरे पास किताब थी, मेरी चिट्ठी थी यूनिवर्सिटी की कि मैं क्यों खींच रहा हूँ. एंड आई यूज्ड टू आंसर ऑनेस्टली कि आई डोंट नो कि कुछ बदलाव आएगा कि नहीं बदलाएगा, लेकिन आपकी बात मैं कहना चाहता हूँ. और हमेशा ऐसा हुआ कि कभी वर्कर्स जो काम करते थे, लेबरर्स थे, बहुत सारी कहानियां हैं उनकी, बहुत सारे उनमें दे वर वेरी ट्रबल्ड and they were all what Jan Reven calls halpatis. That means they were all from the Dalit community. And it was always the supervisors who had a problem. When I went to a construction site, when I went to a diamond cutting site, when I went to a textile factory to shoot what's happening and it was, it was always the people in charge who did not want me to do that. But it was always the workers who invited me. So when I was photographing diamond cutting workers in Surat, you cannot get access to those sites because these are what they call, informal. They're doing these old rudimentary methods, and they live in the factory. And so I used to get a call at 11 o'clock. कि अब supervisor चले गए हैं, आप आ जाइए तस्वीर खींचने के लिए. So it was, and when I landed on the Rajdhani in the morning, 4 बजे पहुंचती थी सूरत राजधानी, तो एक मेरा रिक्शे वाले दोस्त बन गए थे. वो मुझे पिकअप, मैं फोन करता था, मैं आ रहा हूँ, तो मुझे पिकअप करते थे. उन्हीं के बदौलत I was able to navigate my systems. The Holi we kheli Diwali. I learned something very important. I don't know if art mattered to that book mattered. It was the first book on migrant labor. I think there has not been another book on migrant labor in India. As a photographer, what I don't know if it mattered how that book changed anything, because we still have 90% of our labor force is still informal labor, and you can see what happened in the COVID crisis. But it changed me as a person, completely changed me, changed my perspective, changed my ideas of what we read in university, what poverty is and what all these ratios are. I found not poverty, I found dignity. And I found a great zest for life. I photographed sugarcane workers, जो सुबह से 6 बजे से रात को 9 बजे तक काम करते हैं वहाँ पर शुगर फील्ड में. और वहाँ चाइल्ड लेबर भी है, जो आप चाइल्ड लेबर बोलते हैं. बट चाइल्ड लेबर क्या करे when you are paid on family wages, not as individual wages. So what do you mean by child labor? तो पूरा फैमिली पीस रेट में काम होता है वहाँ पर. तो रात को वो कैंप में जाते थे, मैं भी जाता था उनके साथ. वो अपना रोटला बनाते थे, फिर वो गाना शुरू करते थे. And it was like they were, you saw they were not labor anymore, they were not poor anymore, and completely changed the way I looked at this whole categories of poverty. And the growing lexicon is something to do, that thing, what does it mean, about how we think, how we categorize these elements. So then I worked with other communities. I worked with the forest displaced community, and I was told by a group which invited me, we want to see the revolutionary spirit. So I worked with them for 8 months, and there's a friend of mine, Colin Gonsalves, who's a lawyer. I said, Colin, you have to help them. We took the Supreme Court, so they were not displaced, finally. But they said, we'll be displaced to document us. Aap hamari kahani, because they're a very old community. So I created a document, an album for them. And so when I was presenting this, the group which invited me told me that, but where is the revolution in your pictures? So I said, Madam, मैं तो देखता हूँ, तस्वीरें खींचता हूँ. तो वो, according to what I talked to them, मैंने कहा बताइए इन कहानी की, what they were saying is that if you take me to a protest march one day, उस दिन मेरे को पैसे कौन देगा, मेरी daily wages, मेरा चूल्हा कैसे जलेगा रात को. So this idea of revolution and idea of daily life, this somehow did something to me, and the reality of existence, I saw very close, and it changed my environmental work completely. It became about environmental justice, and all the work we do is from that frame. And that is one question which constantly has been it draws me, that what do we mean by justice? What is the word called justice? Can we have environmental change without environmental justice? I seriously think we cannot, because it's a core idea of environment. But since I was also preparing for this talk, I want to read out a few things which I had taken some notes. And I was reading this quote by Picasso for his Guernica painting. I think it is very important. So he says, what do you think an artist is? An imbecile who has only his eyes if he is a painter, or ears if he is a musician or a liar. In every way, no, painting is not done to decorate apartments. It's an instrument of war for attack and defense against the enemy. And he was speaking in the Spanish struggle at that time. And he continues, the Spanish struggle is a fight for reaction against the people, against freedom. My whole life as an artist has been nothing more than a continuous struggle against reaction and the death of art. In the so, and he was working on Guernica at that particular time, and it's one of the most classic paintings we can think of. Even here, if you look at some artists, two late artists come to mind who were also friends. Vivan Sundaram, who passed away, who was involved with Sehmat, but all his life he tried to bring the idea of social justice into his work. And Tushar Jog, who also, as a very young artist, passed away. And there are other people also today who are practicing those. If you take Arun Kumar H.G., who runs the Sara Center in Bangalore, he comes from a farming family. A lot of the money he makes, I know that personally because he's a friend also, that a lot of the money he makes, he puts back in the Sara Center. Sara Center is the village he came from in the Western Ghats, near Sambhoga, in the Western Ghats, to take farmers out of this green agriculture, green revolution agriculture, preserving seeds. और बहुत सारे young artists हैं, श्वेता भट्ट जो काम करती हैं नागपुर में, working with young farmers. I mean, she's one of she's from Baroda. She could have chosen a life of the market, but they formed a group and they're working with farmers for many years now, trying to revive short staple organic cotton. So there are many forms where people get engaged back into society and be part of. And of course, we take of revolution and protests and the social movements have been, many artists have got involved in, not only here, everywhere, particularly in Latin America. There's a whole history of artists who have been part of social movements, where art emerges from the involvement in, and it's not meant for the market. Somehow this market skews everything. And if you think of without the market, then you see the artists are trying to do different things. They might end up doing different things. Now the question which I work on, and I like to talk a few minutes on that, is the ecological question. I mean, we all hear of climate change and all that. And it's questions about nature. Now this is a very entangled problem, because when we think of politics, and of course when I think of social change, what is the perspective through which we do social change? You can do a social change about protecting a forest without thinking of the people in the forest. So you can also have a view in which that people are more important or equally important, that forest can only be preserved if people are also part of it. So there's a whole people and part conflict. So social change is not a definitive thing. It is also defined by your own politics, your own viewpoints. And we have now many artists who don't hesitate to call themselves Dalit artists, who are presenting a very different viewpoint, challenging the narratives as have been presented. Now, this is all to me an ecological question, because the ecological question is basically premised on the relationship to the non-human. What is the relationship to nature? And what is nature? You can be an abstract. If you look at Constable's paintings or British paintings of landscapes, or even Richard Long's, the famous Scottish artist, used to walk and not mark the ground, because there's a certain kind of relationship which you saw. It's like a kind of relationship of abstract nature, nature as divine, which they have. Nature is beautiful. But this is not the idea of nature, which is, you talk to artists like Dharmendra Prasad, who works in Assam, and he tells a story that when I was young, my mother used to say, ki aap ghas kaat ke lao. He said, "Main ghas kahan kaatu?" Because every field I go to, because he comes from a Dalit family, every field I go to is owned by somebody else. So even cutting grass is a transgression. So जो घास की line बनती थी बिना field, उसमें काटते थे. So these experiences, and he's an excellent artist, a very fine artist. These experiences inform a new idea of nature. What is that nature? Which is being exposed by that relationship of a social hierarchy. And so that nature is not an abstract which Constable says कि बहुत सुंदर ये आसमान है, clouds कितने सुंदर हैं, abstract, the sublime of the cloud. But to me, it's a constant production within a social hierarchy, constant relationship being produced depending on what your relationship is to nature. It's an everyday relationship. It is not an abstract relationship with only English romantic poets can write about. So there is this whole problem of reviving this idea of nature as a very political and relational space, not as an abstract space. So you see that all these debates you see on climate change, and of course I've been part of them because I also 30 years back we started an environmental not-for-profit and we work on environmental justice issues, that many of these things are pointing towards कि आप बहुत बड़ी टेक्नोलॉजी लगा दीजिए, आसमान में बिल गेट्स कहते हैं आसमान में एक शीशा लगा दीजिए और सूरज की रोशनी को वापस फेंक देगा. But these are treating like the planet is one thing, but it can be differently produced, if I may use the word. It's a constant production, not something given. So in terms of representations as an artist, so as I said, there's a certain kind of representation which represents certain kind of colonial mentality, certain kind of abstract colonial mentality, and we see that in the colonial economies, the whole trade of rubber and trade of cacao or cocoa and the slave trade was based on these commodities. And these are questions of the planet and of social entanglements in nature. So we have to be careful on when we think of what is the perspective through which we look at change. Social action bolte hain, to kiski aankh se dekh rahe hain hum. There's another word which is used a lot. I'm sorry, I'm a bit of a critique of it, so pardon me if I offend anybody. It's the idea of inclusivity. मेरा problem inclusivity में ये है कि inclusivity into what? It's a very, and we use that all the time because it comes from the economic logic of the world. Inclusivity into what? Inclusivity into a center. So when you talk of, not big word, everybody decolonial, decoloniality, but उसका क्या मतलब है कि when you have taken over lands and you've taken away property, then what does decolonization of something mean? And this is also about to do with how artists do practice in this area. So unless you have an equal shift the center both ways, तभी आपका equality होगा ना. So inclusivity into what? It's more about decentering the center. And there are artists who work on this, and some of the very promising artists are, which I look at, follow very closely, are artists who are from here, from our landscape, from South Asia, from India, because this is the everydayness of the social fractures which we have here. And I mean, I also have a list of them because a few years back we started a very small artist-run not-for-profit, and our only task is to identify and promote and support in whatever way we can, even not only through money but only being the support structure, because money is only short supply. We're not a capitalist foundation, but how to protect these give strength to these practices which we need to hear and listen to, because I think artists are saying things which we need to hear, because that is the future. And what they're saying on the ground, what Dharmendra Prasad, what Alga Collective, what Shweta Bhattad are saying on the ground, we have to listen to very carefully and formulate in this dystopian scattering of impossibility to read the world in one particular framework, because there's a loss of ideology. You don't know what ideology means anymore. There's also a fragmentation of politics. So how should we read? And I think I always look towards the art practice and the artist who are working in their in the political space, which if I may use the word ontological. You don't need to read Foucault to them. They know what power is. They know what exploitation is. And they may not express it in the way of a protest, but the expression will hold that protest. And that is I think the finest thing about art. It can hold expression in a way in which you have to really, it changes from inside, not only from a rhetoric of a political slogan, but it changes you from inside, and that's what the revolutionary spirit, I think, does. And I would love to be more of an artist like that. I'm just in this sphere, a small person is trying to do something. Thank you.
Well, friends, you would hopefully agree with me that we had 4 very different versions of the exploration of this theme. So now is the time when you can shoot a question. And the question has to be sharp, pretty, not a statement, opinion, but a question. And if you can identify the person you are asking, then identify. As who said, asking of the first question is always difficult. फिर तो सबके
चक्षु खुल जाते हैं,
दूर हो जाते हैं।
चक्षु खुल जाते हैं।
हाँ, चक्षु हो सकता है आपके ज्ञान चक्षु पहले से ही खुले हों, हालांकि मुझे संदेह है। Yes, is the first one someone? No. You know, हिंदी में मुग्ध शब्द का वो प्रयोग नहीं होता है जो संस्कृत में होता है। संस्कृत में इसको कहेंगे कि आप लोग तो ये सुन के सारे वक्तव्य सुन के मुग्ध हो गए, मतलब तो मुग्ध का एक अर्थ मूर्ख भी होता है। तो जो संस्कृत जानते हैं वो जानते होंगे कि उसमें ये अर्थ भी ध्वनित होता है। तो बहरहाल, आई होप दिस इज नॉट ट्रू फॉर यू, प्लीज आस्क वन क्वेश्चन एट लीस्ट। There are so many young people and they don't have questions.
It
Yes,
seems
please.
that all of us
There she is.
grey
She
haired
has.
people don't have
There she is.
answers.
In fact, grey-haired are prevented from asking. Yeah, go ahead. And please utter your name.
Okay, my name is Anushka. I'm from JNU,
Ah.
and I would like to ask Yashadatta sir that you talked about inhibitions. What would you prescribe the young minds that how can we come out of these inhibitions?
Well, hello.
Tell me.
Well, it's a small process as well as difficult process. Telling out of personal experience, for me, killing inhibitions was so easy for me because I was born and brought up in a very different environment, as simple as this. But for a person who is born and brought up in a highly traditional environment, for that person it becomes very difficult to kill those kind of inhibitions. So, ideally speaking, you have to take an ideological position and a firm belief in the ideological position. That also, and the best part of taking a very rational ideological position also has a constitutional mandate. So we can survive in a society accordingly.
Yeah. Yes? Mike here.
I don't need a mic, I think I'm...
No, it's not the question. We are recording.
Oh,
So that you don't deny that this was not what I said.
Of course.
Yeah.
My question to anybody who would like to answer it really, but one of the struggles we have as anybody who's wanting to fight against a very aggressive line sort of social structure that we all live in, is that there's such a fundamental divide that there is no conversation. We sort of have conversations in our silos, but we're not able to have a conversation with each other. More often than not, what tends to happen is that, we're just shouting into an oblivion and nobody's really responding to it, or the response is very aggressive. How does one make this conversation happen with the side that doesn't want to listen to our point of view? Anybody who would answer?
Well,
Thank
it's a very political,
you. Yes. Thank
very
you.
political question,
Yes.
and I would like to answer in the same tone. You see, there are people. See, भक्त जो है,
जी,
वो
correct.
वो मैं ये कहूँगा कि वो पूरे फुल बैठ रहते हैं, कि उनमें कुछ बचा नहीं रहता, कुछ भी माला खाली नहीं रहता, क्योंकि वो भक्त है, ठीक है ना? और बिना उसके आप भक्त नहीं,
भक्ति में तो वैसे भी आंखें बंद हो जाती हैं।
वैसे भी आंखें बंद हो जाती है। तो चाहे वो आप इसका भक्त हो या उसका भक्त हो, चाहे आप इस नेता का भक्त हो, चाहे इस देवता का भक्त हो, चाहे उस नेता का भक्त हो, चाहे उस देवता का भक्त हो, तो भक्त जो है वो हमेशा आंखें बंद करके रखता है, तो इसलिए उनमें कोई माला खाली नहीं होता है। और अंगुत्तर निकाय में बहुत अच्छा एक उदाहरण है। तो बुद्ध कहते हैं वो 4 तरह के लोग बताते हैं, और वो कहते हैं कि मैं ऐसे लोगों से अपना सर नहीं फोड़ूंगा। It's very important and it's an important lesson for all of us. दूसरा ये है कि जो हाफ मैड है, जो आधे भक्त है, तो उनमें माला खाली है, तो आप उनके साथ निगोशिएट कर सकते हो, बोल सकते हो, ठीक है ना। एक तीसरी प्रक्रिया भी है। देखिए क्या है, सी इट्स वेरी सिंपल। वी एज अ नेशन, यू सी what constitute a nation? The basic thing which is important for making any nation a nation is, as you know, it's a wonderful analysis by Dr. Ambedkar when he in Thoughts on Pakistan, and he builds this narration, the whole idea of Pakistan, the whole idea of India, the whole idea of partition, and what are the chances of survival and this, that, economic sphere and everything, political and economic sphere. Finally he comes and says that, okay fine, can partition be avoided? So he says, yes, it can be avoided, provided both the parties agreed for shared aspirations. So it is very important to create these shared aspirations, and this can be created only by dialogue. And it is not just a fraternity. It is basically Maitri. Maitri is not mere friendship, but Maitri, as has been explained in the Constituent Assembly debate, it is the compassion. See, it is not fraternity, but it is a Maitri, and basically it is based on compassion. Compassion, only compassionate mind can understand the differences, and will have a mutual respect. So unless until we inculcate this idea of mutual respect for a human being and their existence and their ideas, whether they are wrong or right, that is a different matter. You may agree that I don't believe in God, so I will not agree with you that God exists. Correct? Similarly, you will not agree with me. You will say that God exists and therefore I don't agree with you. But at least you should have that kind of an acceptance. And that is possible when you have a compassionate mind. Violence, see, hate, anger, violence will never produce compassion. Hate, anger, violence will never make our nation a healthy nation. You have to understand that. And without that, you can't win people. लोगों को गाली देके आप लोगों को बदल नहीं सकते. वे as simple as this. कोई भी सोसाइटी हो, आपको प्यार से ही समझाना पड़ेगा. You know that expression of love, that expression of compassion is very important, and you can't have a nation based on hate, anger, and violence.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? Yes.
Hello. This question is for all.
नाम बताइए.
My name is Sheenam. This question is for everyone in general, no one in particular. We all talked about how art has always been criticized, and today art is in a crisis. So, if I take the political and the historical context in the post-independence India, it has always been criticized. So, how is it different today? Is it different? Is it similar to what has been happening since our independence era?
Yeah, you should answer this.
Want to answer?
नहीं आप बताइए पहले आप
सारे क्वेश्चन उन्हीं को नहीं, सारे जवाब
नहीं, वो ये है ना,
थोड़ा कुछ बोल देंगे तो मैं कुछ
नहीं आप बोलिए
बोल दो, I will supplement you.
I want to understand, you said art is in crisis, so I want to know what you mean by that.
I don't mean, what I was trying to say is, it's under attack, not in crisis, art is under attack. We have seen censorship since always actually. So, And all of you were talking about how in the present political scenario, it is much more severe. That's what I got from your talks. So my question is, even I won't take name of any period, but it has always been like that since in the post-independence era, particularly I'm talking about. How is it different today? Is it different, or has it always been like that since independence?
So my view is that whenever art becomes, whenever the state realizes that art is important, there is always an attempt to control it and to become national art. So even 20 years back or 30 years back, if a show was going to Europe and the works did not agree, the embassy would say कि ये काम नहीं दिखा सकते आप. ये तो हमेशा हो. अभी बीकानेर हाउस में शो हुआ था तो कुछ काम था, I won't name names, but वो काम उतारना पड़ा वो क्योंकि. So this is always when the state has a certain character, and then they want to, and I think it also, the soft power which starts getting controlled at some point when it becomes to that point. It happened during the World War also. So this is very much part of that art does matter. But when there's an agenda to that. Hussain was attacked when? It's not now. Shuru se. So it's never been a time when I think goes against a certain narrative, then it starts getting attacked. This is my feeling, but maybe yes.
Well, to be precise, I'll just make a small narration. You know, when I'm one person who is always invited in the seminars of the social sciences. Okay, I don't think any art historian in India, I can claim so, has ever been invited to so many social sciences conferences, and of course I went and spoke about art and other things. And the real question from the political science and the sociologists and the historians, not art historians, I'm talking about the modern historians, is that how much your art was part of the political democracy. We have very few names. Even if you talk about Hussain being attacked, but Hussain was very much part and parcel of the Brahmanical cultural nationalism. Let me tell you this. So the attack also has two different aspects. One is by state, as Ravi has explained that there is this mechanism of control. Another is the public itself. When Savi Savarkar put his exhibition in Lalit Kala Academy, he was literally attacked. His painting was starred, that Manu painting which he made. The art world did not come forward. Let me tell you. The art world also has this idiotic distinction of wo to hamara nahi hai. It's very, very true, I'm telling you. Neither when person like J. Nandakumar was attacked for his Gandhi painting. So there are these instances. However, the artist went on continuing their art practices and produced artworks. Today, in the historical narrative, those things have become the most significant marker of development when you write about contemporary art practices. So it is a choice by the artist, and if majority of the artists have chosen to be part of political democracy and make their art practices accordingly, I am sure there will be a change in the public sphere also.
Yes, this will be the last one.
I have one for Laila ji, one for...
8 minutes, okay. Give the mic. Okay. Let him
No,
speak. Then
they
you,
are there to record.
you wait.
Yes.
Please wait. Go ahead.
Sir, I have a question for you. So you talked about a poetry of Faiz Ahmad Faiz which appeal people across the globe in a different political context. Sir, I just want to know that there are few poetry, most of poetries which are written to appease the individuals. For instance, the romantic poetry is written in the praise of Bilwit. Sir, what is the utility of those poetries for a wider society, and how it actually matters for the larger society and the world?
Support love poetry.
अक्सर ऐसा ही होता है कि यंग जनरेशन बहुत मुश्किल सवाल पूछ लेती है और पुरानी जनरेशन को फेल होने का डर रहता है। मैं ये समझता हूँ कि पोइट्री और आर्ट दोनों को डिफाइन करना भी जरूरी है, और मैं जिस तरह से समझता हूँ वो पहले बताना जरूरी होगा। मेरे ख्याल में आर्ट हो, पोइट्री हो, लिटरेचर हो, दो तरह का होता है, एक अच्छा और एक बुरा। इसके अलावा कैटेगरीज बात की बातें हैं, और जब मैं अच्छा और बुरा कह रहा हूं तब भी दो चीजें समझना जरूरी है। पहली ये चीज कि जो पूरा खजाना हमारे लिए ह्यूमैनिटी ने क्रिएट किया है अब तक, आर्ट लिटरेचर का या पोएट्री का, हम उससे अपने को कैसे जोड़ते हैं, हम उसकी कितनी रिस्पेक्ट करते हैं, हम उन ट्रेडिशन से क्या सीखते हैं जो आर्ट के ट्रेडिशन रहे। अगर हम अच्छी तरह से सीख रहे हैं, उसकी रिस्पेक्ट कर रहे हैं, तो अच्छा लिटरेचर पैदा कर सकते हैं। लेकिन दूसरी चीज बहुत जरूरी है अच्छा या बुरा कैटेगराइज करने के लिए। अगर आर्ट का, किसी नज्म का, किसी कहानी का, किसी पिक्चर का मकसद अच्छा है, if the objective is itself that, then even if you follow every rule and regulation of what you have been given by previous generations and produce beautiful, it's not good literature. As far as I am concerned, it's not good. अगर ये समझ ले तब फिर आपका सवाल बहुत अहम हो जाता है। जो लव पोएट्री है, मेरा ये मानना है कि वो भी प्रोटेस्ट पोएट्री तो होती है। पोएट्री हमेशा प्रोटेस्ट होती है, आर्ट हमेशा प्रोटेस्ट होती है। वो अच्छा है या बुरा है ये अलग बात है कि कैसे प्रोटेस्ट कर। आप हो सकता है कि बाबरी मस्जिद के खिलाफ प्रोटेस्ट करके एक खूबसूरत सी नज़म लिख दीजिए, पर मैं उसे अच्छी नज़म नहीं कहूंगा। अगर आपका मकसद ये है कि समाज को पीछे की तरफ ले जा रहा है, समाज में हिंसा पैदा कर रहा है, आप जंग के खिलाफ खड़े, जंग के फेवर में खड़े, तो वो अच्छी पोएट्री हो ही नहीं सकती। और इसी तरह से लव पोएट्री में भी बुरी हो सकती है, अच्छी हो सकती है। मकसद क्या है? एक बड़ा शायर अगर ये कह रहा है कि एक अदा मस्ताना सर से पांव तक छाई हुई, उफ तेरी काफिर जवानी जोश पर आई हुई, बड़े शायर का है, बहुत बड़ा शायर हो, मेरे हिसाब से ये घटिया शेर। इसमें सारी परंपराओं को रखा गया है ध्यान में, मीटर बेहद खूबसूरत है, इसका अल्फाज बहुत खूबसूरती के साथ पिरोए गए हैं, पर जो फीलिंग्स इन्वोक करता है मेरे ख्याल में वो मकसद अच्छा नहीं, तो मैं इसको अच्छी कैटेगरी में नहीं डालूंगा। तो सवाल ये नहीं है कि लव पोएट्री की बात कर रहे हैं हम, या पोस्टर पोएट्री जिसको कहा गया है। शायद लुधियानवी को अगर कोट करें तो कोई भी शेख ले लीजिए उनका, जिसको ऐरे बरे उनको कौन जरा आंखें तो उठा नजरें तो मिला, कुछ हम भी सुने, हमको भी बताइए किसका लहू है, कौन है। इसमें खूबसूरती मकसद की भी है, और इसमें साथ साथ जो परंपराओं के साथ, जो ट्रेडिशंस के साथ उर्दू पोएट्री के रिलेशनशिप है, वो भी बहुत खूबसूरत है। लेकिन यही जब शायर कहते हैं एक और शेर में कि तुम में हिम्मत हो तो दुनिया से बगावत कर लो, वरना माँ बाप जहां कहते हैं शादी कर लो। अब मुझे नहीं मालूम, मुझे बहुत मुश्किल हो रही है कैटेगराइज करने में कि ये लव पोएट्री में आता है, रेवोल्यूशनरी पोएट्री में आता है, पोस्टर पोएट्री में आता है। मैं ये समझता हूँ कि ये कोई बहुत अच्छा है। मकसद अच्छा है, जबान अच्छा है, खास तौर से दूसरे मसले की।
चलिए वो आखिरी वो साहब थे एक बार। हाँ बोलो।
Laila, yeah, you were sharing us a poignant moment that you get an IS officer to the field with a lota, that experience. So often, many of these young, the young faces, they may get thrust into the steel frame, so-called bureaucracy. So these, the hubris, they always function in straight jackets. How do you get them to that, like to, once you're part of that machinery, the steel framework, how you get them to, how that process, your personal. And I have one for Alona sir, Professor Alona, the protected ignorance, the Brahmanic modernity and the Vedantic syndrome. So this get re-manifested in the FOMO, the postmodern artistic production. It's a manifestation of this, and this hegemony, because of the Brahmanic modernity, the hegemony in the state, that's why they still remain in the protected ignorance. And do you think so when we talk of the functions of art, then aren't we then again going back to the reductionism, like Stalin's view, or the Brechtian view, art is not for the sake of art? Do you think they are doing this deliberately to be in that protected ignorance and state remuneration? And
That is a question I will never understand in my life. What did you say? Anyway,
Let me answer my question.
You have used all the postmodernist concepts. Good.
But before I answer your question, I'd like to just respond a little bit to yours. Because I think that all art, whether it's poetry or literature or painting or whatever, is expressing either an emotion or a thought, sometimes both. And its appeal, if it works, whether it's a poem for your beloved or whether it's a protest poem or something, if it works, it somehow expresses feelings that many of us may have, but we don't know how to articulate it. And so some poetry or some paintings come through the ages, over the centuries, because it strikes that chord and you recognize a feeling or an emotion or thought that you are not able to articulate. And I think that's very important for human beings because it prevents us from feeling alone. So now to the gentleman at the back, and how do you get out of the steel frame? It's actually it's a problem that actually I think a lot of us who've led much freer lives, more spontaneous lives, are worried about. Because today I think the educational system perhaps fits you into a very rigid framework. And it perhaps doesn't explain, it's actually a paradigm because we live in a world which is theoretically freer, where we have more abilities to travel, to explore, to see what things, and yet we lead perhaps narrower lives. And I think particularly young urban Indians, I feel quite sorry for a lot of you who live in such an extraordinary country with such multiple experiences and expressions and ways of living and things, and yet you hardly experience it. And it's a question that how do you do it? But I think it is possible while thinking that we are here to seize opportunities. And the opportunities, the more we seize, the richer our lives become. And there's more ways of measuring life than in what you earn or what social status you have. I know that my life, I started off as an art student in Baroda, thinking I was going to be an artist with a capital A. And actually when I started mainly to actually make a living, And I started doing design assignments, and those design assignments led to working with craftspeople, and then working with craftspeople opened up a whole field which was more than just design. I found my life so much richer, so much more exciting. And I think that you need to look at yourselves and you need to look at this country of ours and say, don't I want to experience it? Even if you may have been taught that you need to become a professional in a very small discipline, it's good to break out every now and then. And I think you'll all be much happier, and India will be much happier if you do that. Thank you.
Well, briefly, sir.
Yes, very
We have to-
briefly. It's a question.
You understood the
You-
question?
I understood the question. I understood the question.
You're very
And-
smart.
I understood the question, and it will take almost 2 hours or 3 hours lecture to explain you everything. So I will not go into those kind of a lecturing things, but just 1 or 2 line explanation. When you read theory as a Shabda Pramanya, then it becomes a problem. But if you don't read theory as a Shabda Pramanya, it does not become a problem. It's very simple. I'll just give you a small example. Like when Derrida says signifier has no fixity of meaning, and everybody accepts that. I also accept it. However, I say very differently. The generation of the meaning depends on its subjective position. Without understanding subjective position, you will not be able to understand the meaning which is being generated by the signifier. So I think this is sufficient enough to explain what it is all about. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, friends, on 8th of February, Raza Foundation would be organizing a poetry reading of 9 young Urdu poets in Annex. So if some of you are interested in, we are a very high quality people, in spite of whatever is said about quality. And we expect an audience like you, which I suspect may be high quality, to come and listen to these things rather than just be confined to your own disciplines. And on 15th February, we'll have the 90th session of Art Matters on the choreographic imagination. So 3 dancers who have done interesting work in choreography, Aranyani Bhargav, Rachna Yadav, and Samyukta Vag. They will be talking about how they have done work in this. So you're all welcome. Come at 6:15, eat your samosa and coffee in 15 minutes, and be here at 6:30. Thank you. And thanks my friends here who've done wonderful work.
Wow, great raises.
Thank you. No, this is not. You can't keep it in a court.
Thank you so much.